And now Jesus encounters Jairus. Jairus is a man of position and respect. He's a ruler of the synagogue. Yet his daughter's critical illness has brought him to Jesus in desperation. Jairus approaches Jesus with humility and courage for coming out in public and kneeling before Jesus, but he's desperate. He emphatically tells Jesus his plan. That is, Jesus, I need you to come to my house and put your hand on my daughter, and if you do that, I know that she won't die, she will live. And as they are going, Jesus is interrupted by a bleeding woman who stops the whole procession. And Jesus is going to tell her that her faith has saved her. It's something that he only says to a few people. And at that time, Jairus' servants come up and say, don't bother the master, the teacher anymore. Your daughter is dead. And Jesus immediately turns to Jairus and says, he gives him a command. He doesn't say it'll be okay. He doesn't say it'll be all right. He doesn't say, don't worry. He says, don't be afraid, only believe. And that's all he said. Jairus didn't say anything. He's been told that his daughter's dead, but they continue on to Jairus' house. All right, so that's the story. You ready, Jackie? Here we go. We're going to start in Matthew because this is the condensed version, but these encounters tonight are in all three synoptics, Matthew, Mark, Luke. And as we've talked about before, the little gospel of Mark is many times our primary text. So tonight, I've got Mark as the primary text again. It seems to give us the most amount of details, even though it's the shortest gospel. But in these encounters, we get more details from the Gospel of Mark. So, starting with Matthew, it's the condensed version. And also in the Gospel of Mark, which will be our third gospel that we're going to read, Mark gives us the context for this encounter. And we don't really get the context from Matthew and Luke. So let me tell you what it is. You might recognize it from Jesus Encounters week number 4, I believe it was. Jesus and his disciples were attempting to cross the Sea of Galilee to go to the other side. They encountered a severe storm. Jesus got up and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm. They made it to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. Do you remember who's there? The Gerasene demoniac meets Jesus out of the tombs. And then Jesus has that wonderful encounter where he delivers the man from a legion of demons. But the town asks Jesus to leave. And so Jesus leaves and they go right back across the Sea of Galilee. When they get back to Jesus' hometown of Capernaum, that's when this story with Jairus takes place. He's just come back from the Decapolis. That's the 10 Greek cities on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. That's where he met the demoniac. They didn't want Jesus, so he came right back home to Capernaum, and that's where this encounter with Jesus begins. Matthew also adds a few things that some of the others do not. Matthew calls Jairus a ruler. He does not name Jairus. The other Gospels tell us he's a ruler of the synagogue. It also says that the crowd of mourners that have come to mourn his daughter's death contain flute players, and that's not in the other Gospels. And also in Matthew, Jesus says the girl is not dead, but she's sleeping. And finally, Matthew records that the news of this miracle that Jesus is going to do for Jairus spreads like wildfire throughout the region. All right, so here's where we pick it up, right here. Right here. There we go.
As Jesus was telling them these things, suddenly one of the leaders came and knelt down before him, saying...
Now it's Jairus. Matthew doesn't tell us it's Jairus, but it's Jairus. And he comes and kneels down.
My daughter just died, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live.
Now this is a little confusing, but we're going to go ahead and get it out of the way first, because what Matthew has done is he's taken two different things here and he's put them together right here, put them together in two different things. When Jairus initially came to Jesus, he said, "My daughter is dying, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live." After the interruption by the bleeding woman, Jairus tells Jesus, "My daughter just died." So this is a little out of order with the chronology of Mark and Luke, but that's how you understand this, because any other way just doesn't make sense. But that's where those two phrases come from, and they really came from two different times. And Matthew just put them together because he's got a really short version of this encounter. He leaves a lot of details out. So
Jesus and his disciples got up and followed him.
All right, so they're going to follow Jairus to his house. Now we're going to move over to Luke and read the expanded version. This is the expanded version of Jesus and Jairus. Luke is a physician, and he adds these details that are not specifically in Mark. He says that this daughter of Jairus' is his only child. Luke is the one that tells us she was 12 years old. Luke, the physician, states that no one could heal the woman that has the issue of blood, the bleeding issue. And Luke describes the parents of the dead girl as being astonished when Jesus brings her back to life. I kind of let the cat out of the bag there, but you might not figured it out that that's what's going to happen. All right, so they've returned to Capernaum after crossing the sea, and Jesus dealt with the demoniac, and now he's come back to his hometown of Capernaum. This is how Luke records it.
When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him.
Now, Jesus has already become very popular in Capernaum. Jesus operated out of this town that's on the coast of the Sea of Galilee. Several of his disciples were from Capernaum. And so people knew very well about Jesus in Capernaum. And so they were waiting for him to come back. He left, he went across the sea, he calmed the storm, he saved the demoniac, and then he came right back, and they were all waiting, and they began to throng him again when he came back.
Just then a man named Jairus came. He was a leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house, because he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying.
All right, so Luke gives us a lot more info than Matthew did. And he fell down. Look at his desperation. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him. All right?
While he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him.
Now, Matthew didn't tell us that, but nearly crushing him. That's a really tight, big crowd. And Jesus is in the middle of it. All right, and now we're going to go over to Mark and read Mark's version.
When Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the sea.
Okay, so he's come back to his hometown in Capernaum after calming the storm and after saving the demoniac.
One of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, "My little daughter is dying. Come and lay your hands on her so that she can get well and live."
Now, everybody that has children can understand this. It's just so painful when your child or your great-grandchild is having a health problem and you can't do anything except fall at Jesus' feet and beg him earnestly. He's desperate. My little daughter is dying. I've got a plan. I don't know where he came up with this plan. It's interesting because he gives this plan to Jesus and Jesus follows his plan. Jesus does exactly what Jairus asks because that's what his faith is. His faith is Jesus will come, lay his hands on her. She will get well. It's like Jairus says, I can just see it in my mind. And that's what faith is. Faith is seeing that thing that you can't really see, but you're seeing it in your mind. You're having faith for it. All right?
So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd was following and pressing against him.
Here again, Mark records the crowd, a large crowd pressing against him. And now comes the interruption. Jesus has been interrupted by the bleeding woman. He stops to save the woman. This stopping, this interruption, as Jackie said, it must have, maybe it infuriated Jairus, or maybe he just lost hope. Probably one of the two. Either he became very anxious, very angry, impatient with Jesus, or maybe at this point he gave up. Maybe he just said, we're never going to make it in time. I should have come to Jesus before the last minute.
When Jesus came to the leader's house, he saw the flute players and a crowd lamenting loudly.
Now, these are some friends and family, but probably also some professional mourners. It's the way they did it back then. They didn't really have funeral homes, but they did have professional mourners, and they even had professional mourning flute players to make you even more sad, I guess, to help you with your sadness. Lamenting loudly, a crowd. A lot of people knew Jairus. Remember who he was, the ruler of the synagogue.
Leave, he said, because the girl is not dead, but asleep. And they laughed at him.
They laughed at Jesus. They weren't laughing, they were mourning, they were crying. But when Jesus said, y'all need to leave, he's talking to the mourners. He said, y'all need to leave. She's not dead, she's just sleeping. And they began to crack up and laugh.
After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up.
Amazing.
Then the news of this spread throughout that whole area.
So Matthew gives us such a very tight, condensed version, and that's all the details he gives us. But let's jump into Luke and get a little more of the story, and then we'll hit Mark, which is our primary text.
While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore."
So Matthew didn't tell us this, but as Jesus was still talking to the woman that had been bleeding for 12 years, and he said, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Right then, someone from Jairus' house said, "Your daughter's dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore."
When Jesus heard it, he answered him, "Don't be afraid, only believe, and she will be saved."
Notice he says, and she will be saved. We talked about on the very first night of the Jesus Encounters about our theme, Jesus has come to seek and to save the lost. And we talked about that word save, and it does not just mean eternal salvation, but it means saving from all types of maladies, diseases, sickness, impossible situations. All of those are included in salvation. So Jesus said, don't worry, she's dead, but she's going to be saved. Interesting.
After he came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her. But he said, "Stop crying, because she is not dead, but asleep."
All right, and then?
They laughed at him because they knew she was dead.
They knew she was dead. She wasn't breathing. She hadn't been breathing for quite a while. She wasn't moving. She had no signs of life. Probably no pulse. I'm sure they knew about the pulse back then, That's a good way. You check for breath, you check for pulse. They knew she was dead.
So he took her by the hand and called out, "Child, get up."
So Jesus is already ceremonially unclean because the bleeding woman has touched the edge of his clothing. Now you can say, well, that's not that big of a deal. She just touched the edge of the clothing. But this is the way the law of Moses was dictated by Moses and the Lord, and that is any type of violation requires a full cleansing. You have to go through the full process. It doesn't matter that the woman didn't get any blood on Jesus, just the fact that she touched the hem of his robe, the edge of his robe. He was unclean. And so he's already unclean, but he didn't go to the temple to get cleaned by the priest. He went ahead to Jairus' house, and now he touches another unclean person, a dead person. It's the same thing as a bleeding person. They're both unclean. Both of them will send you to the temple and to the priest to go through the ritual cleansing process that the law of Moses demanded. All right?
Her spirit returned, and she got up at once. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened.
Her parents were astounded. Now, Jairus believed that Jesus could come and put his hand on the daughter and she would be well. But he didn't believe, apparently, that Jesus could raise the daughter from the dead if he got interrupted by the bleeding woman and took too long to get to Jairus' house. But that's exactly what Jesus did. He touched the dead girl. He took her by the hand. He lifted her up. Her breath returned. Luke, the doctor, tells us her breath, the spirit, is the same as breath. Her breath returned, if you want to think of it like that. Her parents were astounded. But look at this. Jesus instructed them to tell no one what had happened. Now, this is Jesus' second resurrection of a dead person. The first one we're not covering in the Jesus encounters, but it was the son of the widow at Nain. It happened in Luke chapter 7, I believe, the previous chapter. So this is the second time Jesus has raised a person from the dead. And he says, I don't want everybody to know this. Jesus is trying to control his popularity. He's tremendously popular in Capernaum, his hometown, and all around the Sea of Galilee, because that's his area of influence. And the Jews that lived in Galilee were more down to earth and more countrified, if you want to call it that, than the Jews that lived around Jerusalem, the city Jews, the upper echelon Jews, the leadership Jews were in Jerusalem. But Jesus is working up in the north in Galilee, and it's a different type of people there, and he's very well accepted in Galilee, but he's not well accepted in Jerusalem, and he stays out of Jerusalem except for a few feasts that he would go down. We talked about that recently. All right, so tell no one, because he's trying to control his popularity. Also, Jesus does not want to be known only as a trickster, somebody that can do tricks, somebody that can make things happen for you, somebody that can grant your wishes. He's not coming to just grant people's wishes. He's coming to seek and to save the lost, and he doesn't want to be known as just some type of show. And so he tells people, don't spread the news about this. Now, here's our primary text. Mark gives us the most details of the encounter.
While he was still speaking, people came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" When Jesus overheard what was said, he told the synagogue leader, "Don't be afraid, only believe."
Don't be afraid, only believe.
He did not let anyone accompany him except Peter, James, and John, James's brother.
Okay, this is Jesus' inner circle, these three disciples. Several things that Jesus did with them. This is one of them. The mountain of transfiguration, when Jesus was changed into a supernatural body and he spoke with Moses and Elijah on the mountain. That was a time when only Peter, James, and John were in attendance. Also in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus goes a little further to pray in more private, he leaves 8 of the disciples behind, and he takes Peter, James, and John with him further into the garden the night that he was betrayed. Judas was missing, so there was only 11 in the group at that time. All right, keep going, Jackie.
They came to the leader's house, and he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep."
Well, he knew why they were making a commotion and weeping. They were there because she had died, and they were there to help the family grieve and work through this process of pain. They've lost a 12-year-old daughter. They've invested 12 years in her life, and she's not fully a young woman yet. She's just growing into adulthood, and she doesn't get to live out her life. She's died. But Jesus said no. But technically she was asleep. So how can Jesus say the child is not dead, but asleep. Well, she was dead. But to Jesus, it was as if she was sleeping because it was very easy for him to wake her up. For the rest of us, we could not have, so to speak, woken her up. But to Jesus, it was so simple, as if you were to come up to somebody that was sleeping and try to wake them up. He said, this is going to be easy for me. I'm just going to wake her up. And so to Jesus, yes, she's dead, but it's just a temporary death, and it's as if she were asleep, and Jesus is going to wake her up from her nap.
They laughed at him, but he put them all outside. He took the child's father, mother, and those who were with him, and entered the place where the child was.
Okay?
Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha kum, which is translated, little girl, I say to you, get up.
This is interesting because Mark is the only one that gives us the exact wording of Jesus. Now, Mark and all of the gospel writers are writing their gospels in Greek. These words are in Aramaic because we believe that that's the language that Jesus spoke. There's a couple of other times where Mark includes Jesus's exact words in Aramaic, like Talitha kum. In chapter 7, when Jesus heals the deaf-mute man, Jesus says to the man, Ephphatha, which means be opened. And so Mark includes the original, what did I say it was? Aramaic. There you go. The original Aramaic word. And then also when Jesus is on the cross, Mark also includes Jesus' exact words in Aramaic from the cross. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And so the reason Mark does this is to give it a sense of an eyewitness account. This is exactly the wording that Jesus spoke on this occasion, and also in Mark 7 with the deaf-mute man, and also Mark 15 with the cross. So Mark gives us that so that we can kind of be a part of an eyewitness account of this is exactly what happens. What happened?
Immediately, the girl got up and began to walk. She was 12 years old. At this, they were utterly astounded.
Utterly astounded.
Then he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this, and told them to give her something to eat.
Jesus is very practical. He said, now she needs to eat. Now you need to feed this girl. Give her something to eat. Jesus is powerful, but he's practical too. He says, hey, give her something to eat. I didn't fix her hunger problem. I didn't fix that. You have to give her something to eat. So that's our Jesus Encounters for tonight. We just can't make it in less than an hour. I don't know why, Jackie. We just can't do it.
Just 15 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
It wasn't me.
No matter the condition or the circumstance, Jesus responds when we come to him in faith. It was their desperate faith that caused them to get their salvation that Jesus provided for them that day. God bless you. Thanks for coming.